Night was quiet, but inside the billionaire's penthouse, there was anything but peace. He stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city, his mind lost in the past. It had been years since she walked away without a word, vanishing, as if she had never been a part of his life. He had spent months searching, demanding answers that never came. Eventually, he had been forced to move on, even if a part of him never truly let go. The world saw him as powerful, untouchable, a man who had everything. But what no one knew was that behind the wealth and success, there was a wound that had never healed. He had built walls around himself, refusing to let anyone get close again. Love had once been his greatest weakness, and he had sworn never to let it break him a second time. Then, without warning, everything changed. That evening, a familiar figure appeared at the entrance of the high-rise building where he lived. She had no appointment, no invitation. Just her presence alone was enough to send shockwaves through his carefully controlled world. The receptionist hesitated before calling upstairs. The moment he heard her name, his entire body went still. For a long time, he just stared at the phone, unable to believe it. She was back. The one person he never expected to see again had returned, and she had something to say. Moments later, the elevator doors slid open. She stepped inside, her fingers trembling as she pressed the button for the top floor. The ride felt endless. With every passing second, memories came rushing back, the love they had shared, the nights they had spent talking about their future, the promises that had been broken. She knew he would be angry. She knew there was a chance he wouldn't even let her explain. But after all this time, the truth could no longer stay buried. When the doors finally opened, he was there, standing just a few feet away, his expression unreadable, his sharp eyes locked onto hers, searching, questioning, demanding answers without a single word. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with tension, with everything that had been left unsaid. Finally, she took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I know you have every reason to hate me," she said softly. "But before you do, you need to hear the truth." His jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "The truth," he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "Now you care about the truth." She swallowed hard, knowing this was just the beginning. What she had to say would change everything, and once he knew, there would be no going back. She stood there, waiting for him to say something, anything, but the silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotions. His eyes, once filled with warmth when he looked at her, were now cold and guarded. The weight of the past settled heavily between them. He finally took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. "Why are you here?" His voice was low, but there was an edge to it, anger, disbelief, maybe even something deeper that he refused to acknowledge. She inhaled shakily, her fingers tightening into fists at her sides. "Because you deserve to know the truth." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "The truth?" He shook his head, turning away as he ran a hand through his hair. "You disappeared. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone." His voice grew colder. "And now, after all this time, you suddenly care about the truth." Her heart clenched at his words. She had expected this reaction, but it still hurt. "I never wanted to leave," that made him turn back sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Then why did you?" She hesitated, the words caught in her throat. It would have been easier to let him keep hating her, to let him believe she had walked away without a second thought. But he deserved to know. He needed to know. "I didn't have a choice." His jaw tightened. "There's always a choice, not this time," she whispered. The tension in the room grew heavier, almost suffocating. He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he even wanted to hear what she had to say. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped back and motioned toward the seating area. "Fine. Talk." She hesitated before walking past him, feeling the weight of his gaze on her the entire time. She sat down on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly together. He remained standing, arms crossed. Waiting, she glanced down, gathering her thoughts. "The night before our wedding," she began, "I got a call. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, everything changed." His expression hardened. "Go on." She swallowed hard, the memory still vivid. "It was a warning. A threat. Someone told me that if I went through with the wedding, something terrible would happen to you." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "That's ridiculous." "I thought so too," she said quickly. "At first, I didn't believe it. But then, I started getting messages. Pictures of you, your family, your business. It wasn't random. Whoever it was, they knew everything. They said if I didn't leave, if I didn't disappear, you would pay the price." His eyes darkened, but he didn't interrupt. "I tried to ignore it," she continued, her voice shaking slightly. "I thought maybe it was just some sick prank. But then, the night before our wedding, I found a note inside my apartment." She looked up at him, her heart pounding. It had details about the accident your father was in, the one no one was ever able to explain. His face went rigid. She nodded slowly. "I knew then that whoever was behind it wasn't bluffing." For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, his voice was dangerously quiet. "So you ran." Tears burned at the back of her eyes. "I thought I was protecting you." His laugh was bitter. "Protecting me? By destroying me?" She flinched. "I didn't know what else to do." His eyes flashed with emotion, but he quickly masked it. "So why come back now? What changed?" She hesitated. "Because I finally found out who was behind it." His entire body tensed. "Who?" She took a shaky breath, knowing the next words would change everything. "Someone close to you." His expression darkened. "Who?" he repeated, his voice dangerously low. She met his gaze, fear and determination warring within her. "If I tell you, you won't be able to unhear it." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I don't care. Tell me." She closed her eyes for a brief moment, before finally speaking. And when she did, everything shattered. The moment the name left her lips, the air between them shifted. He stared at her, his eyes darkening with something unreadable: shock, disbelief, maybe even fury. The silence stretched, thick with tension, as if the entire room was holding its breath. "That's not possible," he finally said, his voice low and tight. She knew this wouldn't be easy for him to accept. It hadn't been easy for her either when she first discovered the truth. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't sure," she said quietly. He shook his head, pacing to the other side of the room. "You're asking me to believe that someone I trust, someone I've known my entire life, was behind everything?" She swallowed hard. "I know how much they mean to you," he turned sharply, his eyes locking onto hers. "Then you should also know that this sounds insane," she exhaled shakily, pressing her palms against her knees. "I wouldn't have come back if I didn't have proof." His body stiffened. "Proof?" she nodded. "After I left, I spent months trying to piece things together. At first, I thought it was just a faceless threat, someone who wanted to scare me away. But then I started finding connections, patterns. I followed every lead, every whisper, until it all pointed to one person, his fists clenched at his sides. And you never thought to come to me sooner." She flinched at the anger in his voice. "Would you have believed me?" He didn't answer. The silence was enough. Taking a deep breath, she continued. "I found messages, transactions, a trail that links them to the threats I received. And not just that." Her voice trembled slightly. "There was an account, one that made payments to someone involved in your father's accident. That stopped him cold." His entire body went rigid, his face unreadable. She hesitated before adding, "The same person who threatened me." His breathing was shallow, uneven. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, in a dangerously quiet voice, he said, "Where is this proof?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. her fingers shaking slightly as she held it out to him. He didn't take it immediately. Instead, he stared at it as if it might burn him. Finally, with slow, measured movements, he took the folder and flipped it open as he scanned the documents. His expression changed. First confusion, then realization, then something far darker. His grip tightened around the papers. "This can't be real," he muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice. "I wish it wasn't." She whispered. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling harshly. "If this is true." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Then I've been blind this entire time." She didn't respond. She knew he needed a moment to process, to let the weight of it settle over him. But they didn't have time to dwell, because if they had figured out the truth, then whoever was behind it would know too, and that meant they were in danger. Just as the thought crossed her mind, the lights in the room flickered. A chill ran down her spine. Something felt off. He noticed it too, his posture shifting, muscles tensing. "Did you tell anyone you were coming here?" he asked, his voice low. She shook her head. "Only one person knows I'm back." His eyes darkened. "Then how do you explain that?" He gestured toward the window. She turned quickly, and her breath caught. A sleek black car was parked outside, its engine running. The windows were tinted, but she could feel the weight of someone watching them. Her heart pounded. They know. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the folder, stuffing it inside his jacket, before reaching for her hand. "We need to go." Now panic surged through her. "We're somewhere they won't find us." His grip on her tightened as he pulled her toward the back entrance. "We're not safe here." As they slipped out the door, she cast one last glance over her shoulder. The car hadn't moved, but she knew this was only the beginning, because whoever was behind this wasn't going to let them walk away easily. The cold night air wrapped around them as they moved quickly through the shadows. Every step felt heavier, every sound sharper. His grip on her hand was firm, steady, but she could feel the tension coursing through him. He was trying to stay in control, but she knew him well enough to see the cracks forming beneath the surface. They reached the back alley behind the building, pausing just long enough for him to scan the area. The car was still parked in front, its headlights off, but they both knew whoever was inside wasn't just waiting. They were watching. "Come on," he murmured, guiding her toward the narrow path that led to the side street. She swallowed the fear rising in her throat. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," he said, but there was an edge to his voice. As if he wasn't even sure what safe meant anymore. The night stretched around them as they moved further away from the building. The streets were quiet, but that didn't mean they weren't being followed. He kept glancing over his shoulder, his body tense, his mind racing. She knew the weight of the truth was still sinking in. The betrayal, the danger, the realization that someone he trusted had been behind so much of his pain. She wanted to say something to offer reassurance, but what could she say? Nothing about this was okay. As they reached the corner, he suddenly pulled her to a stop. He didn't speak, but his eyes were locked onto something across the street. She followed his gaze, and her stomach dropped. Another car. Different from the first, but just as ominous. It wasn't parked like a normal vehicle. It was positioned deliberately, watching, waiting. His jaw clenched. "They're blocking us in." She felt her pulse hammer against her ribs. "What do we do?" He exhaled slowly, calculating. "We don't go the way they expect." Without another word, he tugged her toward the entrance of an old building. The door was unlocked, and he pushed it open, leading her inside. The air smelled of dust and faded memories, the walls lined with empty shelves and forgotten furniture. It was the kind of place people passed by without a second glance, which made it the perfect place to disappear. He didn't let go of her hand as they moved deeper into the darkness. His mind was working, putting pieces together, trying to figure out their next move. She knew him well enough to recognize that he was doing everything in his power to stay one step ahead. But the truth was, they had no idea how close the threat really was. A noise outside made them both freeze. the sound of tires rolling over gravel. A door opening. They weren't alone. She looked at him, her breath catching. His eyes met hers, and she saw the silent message there. Stay quiet. Stay close. Footsteps echoed against the pavement outside. Slow, purposeful. Whoever was out there wasn't in a hurry. They knew their targets were trapped. Her heart pounded in her chest as they backed deeper into the building. He was scanning the space, searching for another exit, another way out. Then another sound. This time, inside. She stiffened. They're already in here, she whispered. His hand tightened around hers. There was no time to run. No time to hide. They had to face whoever was coming for them. The air inside the abandoned building felt heavy, charged with an eerie stillness. She could hear the faint creak of footsteps on the wooden floor, the sound sending a chill down her spine. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. His other hand instinctively reached inside his jacket, his muscles taut with anticipation. A shadow flickered against the dim light, filtering through the broken windows. Someone was close. Too close. She held her breath as the footsteps drew nearer, slow and deliberate. Whoever was inside wasn't searching in a panic. They knew exactly where to look. Then, a voice. Low, calm, familiar. You really thought you could run forever? Her stomach clenched. It wasn't just anyone. It was someone they knew. Someone they had trusted. He turned slowly, stepping slightly in front of her, shielding her with his body. His jaw tightened as he recognized the figure standing in the doorway. You, he said, his voice filled with quiet fury. The person in front of them smirked, the kind of expression that sent a warning through her veins. Surprised? She felt the weight of realization crash down on her. All the close calls, the near misses, the moments when they had barely escaped it, hadn't been luck. Someone had been manipulating their moves, staying just close enough to push them in the direction they wanted. You set us up, he said, voice dangerously low. The smirk didn't fade. Of course I did. But don't take it personally. It was never about you. It was about her. Her breath caught. Me? The figure took a slow step forward. Did you really think it was over? That you could walk away and leave everything behind? There are still questions that need answers. She shook her head. I don't have any answers. Oh, but you do. The voice turned colder. You just don't realize it yet. She felt his grip on her hand tighten. A silent message. Stay strong. But her mind was spinning. If everything had led them to this moment, then what was next? The figure reached into their coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, tossing it onto the dusty floor between them. You might want to read that before you make any more bad decisions. He didn't move, his eyes locked onto their opponent, searching for the trick. But she couldn't resist. Slowly, she crouched down and picked up the paper, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. She barely registered the sound of the door slamming shut behind them, or the echo of a lock clicking into place. They weren't just trapped. They had just walked into the final stage of the game. Her hands shook as she held the paper, her eyes scanning the words over and over again, but they didn't make sense. It wasn't just about her, it was about everything. Every moment, every choice, every escape had been orchestrated, but not in the way she thought. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was something bigger. He stepped closer, his voice urgent. What does it say? She swallowed hard and turned the paper so he could see. His eyes narrowed as he read, his face darkening with each passing second. We were never running from them. She whispered, her voice barely audible. They were leading us here. The realization hit both of them at once. Every chase, every obstacle, they had never been one step ahead. They had been right where someone wanted them to be. A slow clap echoed through the empty space. They turned sharply, and there, standing in the doorway with a smug expression, was the last person they expected to see clever. The figure said, stepping forward. "You figured it out just in time," his jaw clenched. "What do you want?" The figure tilted their head, amused. "Isn't it obvious? I needed you to see the truth for yourself." Her heart pounded. "The truth about what?" A pause. A smile. Then, the words that made her knees go weak. "The truth about you." She barely had time to process before the doors behind them burst open. More footsteps. More voices. They were surrounded. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Something in the figure's expression made her hesitate. "What do you mean?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. The figure sighed. "You've spent so much time running, so much time trying to escape, that you never stop to ask why. But deep down, you already know, don't you?" A memory flashed through her mind. A conversation she had forgotten. A detail that had seemed insignificant at the time. Her breath hitched. "No," the figure nodded. "Yes." He looked between them, confused. "What are you talking about?" She turned to him, her face pale. "They weren't chasing us because of you," she whispered. "They were chasing us because of me." The figure smirked. "There it is." Her chest tightened. "I was never meant to leave," she realized. "They let me go, so I would lead them back here." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. She hadn't just been a part of this story. She had been the story all along, and now there was only one way it could end. She stood frozen, her mind racing through every moment that had led her here. The truth had been right in front of her all along, but she had been too focused on running, on surviving, to see it. Now, there was no more running, no more hiding. The past had finally caught up with her. He was still beside her, his grip on her hand tightening, as if he could hold her together through sheer force of will. She could feel his pulse hammering as hard as hers, his mind working just as fast to make sense of everything. But there was nothing left to figure out. It was all laid bare. The figure stepped closer, watching her carefully. "You understand now, don't you?" she exhaled shakily. "Yes, good," they said, a slow smile forming. "Then you know what needs to be done." He tensed. "She doesn't owe you anything." The figure raised an eyebrow. "You think this is about debt?" Their gaze flickered back to her. "It's about closure. About finishing what was started." She didn't want this to be true. She wanted to believe there was still a way out, some loophole she hadn't thought of. But deep down she knew. She had never really escaped. She had only delayed the inevitable. She turned to him, her heart aching. "I have to do this." His jaw clenched. "No, we'll find another way." She gave him a small, sad smile. "We both know there isn't one." For a long moment, he just stared at her, searching for something, some hope, some last-minute solution. But the resignation in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. The figure waited patiently, as if enjoying the weight of the moment. "So," they finally said, "what's it going to be?" She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Then, she nodded. "I'll go with you." The tension in the room shifted. The others, the ones who'd been waiting silently by the door, stepped forward as if to escort her. She forced herself to stand tall, to not let them see her fear. But before she could take a step, he moved in front of her, blocking her path. "If she's going, I'm going too." The figure tilted their head, considering him. "Are you sure? This isn't your fight." He didn't hesitate. "It is now." A flicker of something crossed their face, surprise, maybe even amusement. "Very well," they said. The next few minutes passed in a blur. She barely registered the way they were ushered out, the car waiting for them, the quiet streets stretching into the unknown. She only felt the weight of what was coming. He held her hand the entire time. When they arrived at their destination, she wasn't surprised by what she saw. The place she had tried so hard to forget. The past she had been running from. She turned to the figure. "What now?" They smiled. "Now we finish this." The room was silent, except for the distant hum of the city outside. She could feel the years pressing in on her, the ghosts of decisions made and unmade. The figure moved to a desk, picking up a file and tossing it onto the table between them. "Read it," they said. She hesitated, but then reached out, flipping it open. Her eyes scanned the pages, her breath catching on every line. It wasn't just about her. It was about everything. Every move, every choice there had been someone pulling the strings all along. She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. Why? The figure leaned forward. "Because you were never supposed to leave." She felt him shift beside her, his presence a steady anchor. "And now?" he asked. The figure's smile didn't fade. "That depends on you, a choice." The illusion of control. But she saw it now for what it was. She closed the file. "Then let's end this." The air was thick with expectation as the moment stretched, the weight of years of deception pressing down. She wasn't the same person she had been when this started. She had spent too long letting others decide her fate. Not anymore. She met the figure's gaze, unflinching. "I want to make a deal." The figure raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. Go on." She glanced at him, seeing the silent question in his eyes. "Trust me." He didn't look convinced, but he nodded. She turned back to the figure. "You let him walk away. You let him leave, untouched, unharmed. In return, I do what you want." The figure studied her for a long moment before smirking. "Ah, so you do have a heart after all." She ignored the jab. "Is it a deal or not?" There was a pause, then a slow nod. "Fine." He goes free. She felt his grip on her tighten, his silent protest vibrating through his whole body. "No," he said. "I'm not leaving without you." Her heart ached, but she forced herself to be firm. "You have to know. You promised me," she whispered. "You promised we'd get through this. And this is the only way." He clenched his jaw. "There has to be another way." But there wasn't. She turned away before she could lose her resolve. "Take him out of here," she said to the figure. The room shifted as the others moved to escort him away. He fought, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. When the door closed behind him, she let out a shaky breath. The figure clapped their hands together. "Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about your future." She straightened. "Let's." For the first time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't running. She was ready. The night was quiet. When he stepped outside, the city stretching before him. He should have felt relief, but all he felt was loss. He turned, ready to fight his way back in if he had to. But before he could move, someone grabbed his arm. He whirled, ready to fight until he saw who it was. His breath caught. "You?" She smiled, breathless. "Took you long enough." He pulled her into his arms before she could say another word. How she pulled back just enough to look at him. "Because I decided how this story ends." The past was behind them now. The future was theirs to write.